Welcome to Psych for Psychology, a Nystrom and Associates podcast. Our host, Brett Cushing, is a licensed marriage and family therapist at Nystrom. Each week, he talks about all things mental health and therapy with guests, and you get a chance to dive into specific psychology topics that help promote personal development and wellness. And now, your host, Brett.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Psyched for Psychology. I'm Brett Cushing and I have another special guest here today who might be staying with us for a while. We have Krista Orson, and so she's here to talk a little bit with us about active listening. Krista.
Yes. Hi, Brett.
Hey, it's great to have you here again.
I'm really excited to be here. I had such a good time talking about EMDR, and so I'm really excited to be back and talk about active listening.
Well, I'm thrilled too. I had actually, and I told you, some of our listeners have listened to EMDR and found it to be really helpful. And actually got into doing EMDR therapy. They're loving it. Yay. And so...
That's so great.
Yeah. So the pressure's on. You have to deliver again.
It's time to get serious.
Yeah. Could be a challenge for us. We don't take ourselves very seriously, but we do take our topics seriously. And today, what do you want to talk about today?
So I've been thinking a lot about active listening. It's come up several times just recently, both in work settings and also personal settings. And I've been kind of just noticing how in everyday conversation, it tends to be that people don't really know how to do this type of listening. There's a lot of back and forth usually, or like advice. I don't know if you've had the experience of you're just kind of like chit-chatting with someone about your day or even a loved one and sharing something more serious. And I've noticed people tend to want to jump in with advice. People might want to make you feel better and fix it.
Right.
Those are all great things, but I think it's a skill that doesn't necessarily come naturally, but can be easy to use.
Okay, so you want to talk about relational conflict?
Yes.
Was I not listening?
Oh no, Brett! We're gonna have to do an hour long. We're gonna have to do a longer podcast today.
We might
I can
have
tell
to.
This is gonna take some time.
It is. I just had to throw that in there because you can see how invalidating it is when somebody's already. They know what you're going to talk about, or they know what you're saying, and then they totally say the opposite.
A different thing altogether.
Yeah, I remember when I was a pastor and. People would say, hey, really like the sermon today. And I'd say, hey, that's great. What did you like about it? And then they would say something. And I'm like, I didn't talk anything about that,
Yes,
But
totally.
it shows, it's frustrating. And we were just talking about validation and invalidation and how invalidating it can feel when somebody's really not listening. So... Tell us more about why you're thinking active listening is important. Because I'm hearing you say, this doesn't work in relationships when we're trying to listen and communicate because it's a skill and people don't have this skill.
Yes. Actually, great job with your active listening just now. Because a key phrase we'll talk about today is, I heard you say. So you're already utilizing some active listening.
Wow,
Brett.
thank you. I feel so validated.
This is going to go better than I thought.
Okay. Well, thank you for that validation.
Yes. Okay, so this has been on my mind for a couple of reasons. It seems like when your loved ones are stressed out, there's a tendency that you feel more stressed out. So when people in your life are going through some really challenging things, I guess I'll speak for myself. I feel like I really want to help. I really want to be there for them. And I really want to kind of have solutions and I want to have kind of a fix for it. So I'm thinking about someone in my family even right now who's going through a tough time. And for the longest time, I felt like I had to have some answers when she would confide in me. And so one of the things that really helped me was kind of remembering that I don't actually have to have a solution or I don't actually have to have the answer. All I have to do is really listen to the words she's saying. And then if there's a moment where there's a pause in the conversation where it feels like, okay, now I should be saying something, instead of hopping in there kind of with advice or with well, have you looked at it this way? I just started to practice, it sounds like this, and this. Or I'm wondering if what you're saying is this, and this. And just kind of, then she would go back and say, yes, okay, so that's exactly what's going on. And so it took the pressure off of me trying to fix it or have some wisdom, and and I'm talking personally. I'm not even talking in my profession as a therapist, but even in my profession as a therapist, there's times where I'm totally stumped.
What?
I know.
I thought you were the sage, that knew everything.
I know. Most of the time, I do have all the answers, but there's times where I don't know what to say.
All right, Krista, I got to say, it sounds to me like you're doing a whole lot of nothing here, right? So, it sounds almost irresponsible.
Yeah.
And I would think painful, because I feel that too, and I feel it with my kids.
There you go. That's a perfect example.
They come in and they're like, "Dad, this isn't fair, and this isn't right." And
oh my gosh!
And so my emotions go up, and I'm like, I'm thinking, this isn't fair, and then I want to lean in and say, all right, so here's what you need to do, or
wait. My dad does this too. Is this a dad thing?
No, wait, I didn't say I do it. It's just an urge.
Okay.
My kids, they do listen sometimes, so they're like, wait a second, you do this a lot. So
okay, good.
I do. I have at least an urge, and I still have to keep working on it because my emotion can take over. I be Papa Bear, and I want to protect them and give them advice. Or I do this one a lot too. Yeah, I remember when I was your age.
Oh, that's a great example.
And sometimes we call it stealing the spotlight.
Yes.
And I'm sure people are listening and they know people in their lives that they interact with, and the other person is stealing the spotlight because they're not listening. But the intentions, I think, are good.
Well, and that's the thing I want to be really clear about, so I'm glad you brought that up, is this is not so much about, I think people do absolutely have the best of intentions when they're giving advice or when they're saying things like, well, when I was in this situation, it comes from a place of we're trying to relate, we're trying to build a connection. I think it's honestly just never having seen this modeled to us, right? So I don't think this is really something that's modeled to us about just giving people that space to talk. I think we're just kind of socialized that we should have some, advice. We should have we should jump in with a relatable story, right? And so, whereas I think this is why this active listening thing is so easy, and it's like such a hack, like a life hack, because it helps people open up to you and speak, openly with you without you having to really have any solutions. So it's really cool.
Right. Yeah. Two things came to mind. I tell my clients, I do tell them this. I say, hey, it was a great session. You did all the work, and I get paid for it.
And, you say that? That's
it is, because it is, and that's the idea, though. It's not that they're going to be coming in for me to fix them, because that fosters a dependency on me rather than them realizing, I can figure this out, and I might show some blind spots on things. And I think you and I were talking before the podcast how sometimes we make psychology and therapy so complex and all the theories and ideas. And a lot of it is really helping people to talk it out where someone is listening. And the other thing I thought of is you said we don't have this modeled.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, do you have any example of anybody in your life that did model it, that sort of stood out, that you were just somehow, even subconsciously drawn to, like, oh, I sure just appreciate this person. And in retrospect, you kind of say, wow, they really were listening.
Sure.
Can you think of anybody?
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, so to be totally honest with you, I have received therapy and I learned about it from my therapist. So this is so funny because I wasn't yet in my career as a therapist when I learned this, but she taught me about it and she said, this can be applied anywhere. So just with anybody in any situation, when you don't know what to do, or you're like, wow, this person's super overwhelmed. And so honestly, I've learned about it a lot from my therapist, which is really cool to realize because it's just been so helpful for me personally. And it's something that I also try to teach to when I'm, training or clinical supervision with newer therapists is they kind of get hit with this barrage of people's stories and they have that instinct of, I have to have a skill. I have to have an answer. I have to have this, this.
I have to practice this theory now.
Yes. Right. And so that's a big thing we talk about constantly is just listening, deeply listening, right? Just, you don't have to have a brilliant solution. And in fact, that's not even necessarily what people are looking for when they come to therapy.
And it's funny, I think of myself in therapy, but I think of myself when I'm with my kids or my wife or in any relationship.
Yep.
And I think of my therapists at my clinic that I supervise, and I ask them, and I ask myself, why am I talking so much? It's a prudent question. Like, why am I? And it really warrants some introspection because I'm not listening if I'm talking. So I really appreciate what you say. And I think of people, for me, I've been able to do some supervision with Dan Miller, who was who we love, Dan. Dan, you're great.
We love you, Dan.
Probably not even listening, but he was the one that we did the podcast with on Is Laughter Really the Best Medicine? And it was so fun. And when I did supervision with Dan, it was, he was listening. I mean, he got everything I said. And it was so validating. And I did feel heard. And a lot of times, that's all I needed.
Yes.
I needed to be able to sort of get it out, and I needed someone that wasn't going to interject on what to do, what I'm supposed to be doing or should on me in some way.
Right, exactly. Actually, it's funny, we tried this in, we have a consultation group every couple of weeks where we have kind of all of us in the clinic who talk about different clients and kind of like, what should I do? And I'm just feeling stuck with this, where to go with this situation. And we had one day where it was only active listening, no advice, here's what you got to do. And we just tried it. And it was sort of awkward at first because people are so used to saying, hey, you should check out this book, or you should check out this resource, but it changed the whole energy of the group.
How so?
It was calmer. It was quieter. They kind of sat back.
Yeah.
Whereas what I had been noticing, and the reason we tried it, is I had been noticing people just really eager to kind of interject and kind of like multiple different people talking and, so kind of more chaotic. And again, I think in the spirit of trying to help, right?
Yes.
But so we tried this other way, and then I asked for their feedback at the end, and I said, how was this? And they said, wow, what a difference, because it was just a different, no one was in a hurry.
Right.
It wasn't that feeling of we got to fix this and then move along with our day. It was just kind of like, let's just have this space.
And this is so relevant, not just in a therapy setting. It's super relevant in a corporate setting, in a business setting, in a parenting setting, in a marriage setting, in any kind of family setting. It's incredibly practical to just, it's almost like, don't just say something, sit there.
Yes.
Right.
At all possible, right?
Yeah, and it's hard, right?
It is very hard. It is very, very hard
because
we care. Because we care about people. And so when you were talking about with your kids, I think one of the more challenging settings is with parents, right? Parents listening to their children because you want so badly to have a solution or a fix for it.
Right.
And you care so much, and you're just like, let me please help
Absolutely.
you.
And I'll throw this in there.
Yes.
I think we do care. I'm not questioning that, but I also think there's another dynamic in this. I saw this when I was a pastor, and I do funerals and things, and people would sort of have these anecdotes. Well, they're in a better place now, and somebody would be sharing how much they miss their loved one, and someone would say, well, at least they're not in pain, and that's not what people are looking for. But what the intent is to help and to provide some healing here. And there's two problems, I think, with it. One is when I'm doing that, I'm basically saying to you, Krista, you need to change because I can't handle your negative emotions right now.
Yes.
And that's often I don't think on a conscious level, but on a subconscious level, people hear that, and that's what they take away, is you're trying to manipulate me. And it also, when we're not listening and we're providing these anecdotes, it cheapens other people's pain. Where, I know this is really bad pain, but don't worry, I've got one sentence that's going to fix it all for you.
Exactly. If only it were that simple.
Yeah, and sometimes just to sit. I've often said this, not often because I don't think about this often, but if something happened, God forbid, and I lost my family in some tragic incident, I would want my two brothers, Doug and Tim, move in with me for 2 weeks, not even say anything. I would just need them there and to listen.
There you go. They just need your presence.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what active listening does.
Yes.
It gives us a presence without intervention.
Exactly. And actually, I'm so glad you brought that up about when people they have sort of this unconscious, it's like this discomfort about, I so badly want to kind of fix the situation, or your negative emotion is uncomfortable, and again, no one's doing this on purpose, but I think kind of a trick that has helped me when I'm just feeling so, like when I feel like I really do have this piece of advice that this other person just must have, like,
right.
Like even when I'm doing my active listening but I'm having this idea where it's like, I really want to tell them my idea. All you have to do for that is ask first.
What do you mean? What does that look like?
Yes. Okay. So, let's say you've just told me about a problem you're having.
I have a problem with I got lots of problems. Which one do I want to pick? I'll make one up.
Anything.
I have a problem like carbs. Oh, I just love carbs.
Okay.
And I've really got a problem. It's really stressing me out, Krista.
Go.
I'm so stressed.
You're stressed, and you're wanting to change your relationship with carbs. Oh my goodness. So let's skip forward to, I've done active listening where I've said, I've heard you say, and I'm just listening and repeating back key phrases and not giving advice and feedback. So let's say I can't hold it back any longer. I need to give you some advice. All I'm going to ask you is, Brett, I'm wondering if you'd like any advice right now, or if you'd rather I just listen.
I love that. Because really, when you do that, you're respecting a boundary.
Yes.
And I think of this like, when we have sessions, our door is closed. And you don't even knock on the door unless it's a serious kind of emergency.
Yeah.
But the door is a boundary.
Yes.
And it's kind of interesting that we respect that, but we don't respect that with other people when we want to give advice. Can you imagine, like, you're doing therapy or you're in your home and somebody just walks in. You're like, hey, Krista, what are you doing tonight? And you're like in your pajamas, like, come in. And that's really, as parents, as in relationships with people, at work, with employees, with bosses, we don't recognize the boundary and we violate it by just kaboom. We come in and like, I'm here and here's what you need to hear from me, rather than like when you ask that, would you like to hear my thought? You're essentially, you're knocking on the door.
Yes, that is such a great point. And it absolutely is a boundary thing. And I think, like, when I first heard that about ask before you give advice, it blew my mind. I was like, what? You mean you don't just jump in there and tell them your thoughts? Because, again, this is just what was modeled to me and my family, or, in society. It's no one doing anything wrong or malicious. It's just like, this is what I saw. So when I learned about this concept, I was like, oh my gosh, I just have to ask first. And then if they say yes, then they're open to it. See, what happens so often is we give it without asking, and it just kind of falls flat, and they're not listening anyway. Because I don't know about you, but when I'm not in the mood to receive advice, and I receive advice anyway, it's like I have a wall up. I'm not there. I'm not into it. I'm like on a different page entirely. So it not only doesn't help me, but it doesn't really help the conversation or the relationship. It's more just like, it's like, okay, we're just on a different wavelength here, right? So when you ask and then the person says, yeah, I do want some advice, then it's like, okay, connection, right?
Right. Yeah, I can come in now.
I can come in.
And we need to be able to respect it if somebody says no.
Absolutely.
No. Yeah, I remember listening to one of my kids once, and I had all the best advice in the world, right?
Yes,
or at least in my mind I did.
Of course you did.
And I'm listening, and it's like my heart is heavy. And I kept resisting this urge. For about 45 minutes, I resisted it. And then after about 45 minutes, I just said, well, would you like to hear kind of my thoughts on this? And the answer was, no. And I'm like,
yeah, right.
And so I said, well, what can I do to help? Is there anything I can do to help you?
Mm-hmm.
And my kiddo said, kind of confused almost by the question, like, no.
No, yeah, right.
I think that's all I needed.
Yes.
And it feels like I'm doing nothing.
Doesn't it?
And yet it's because we've talked about validation. It's so validating. And it's validating because, like we're talking about, it respects the boundary too.
Right, exactly. No, that's a perfect example of when you said you kind of want to hear my thoughts, do you want to hear my, you know, what I have to say about it, and then respecting that no. But then if you're prepared for the no, it's like, okay, just checking, right?
Right.
Actually, last night I had a conversation with my sister. I have two sisters. I'm the middle of three, and I had a conversation with my younger sister. I had just had some, you know, kind of stressful things happen throughout this week. And she did her active listening. And I got to tell you, I did not think there was a person on earth that could have gotten me out of the bad mood I was in last night. And after less than 30 minutes of her just kind of reflecting back to me what she was hearing, not advice.
Right.
Not like, oh, let me tell you about this situation I was in where it was similar. I felt like a different person. And again, she didn't have solutions. She might have that she didn't share. Mm-hmm. She didn't do anything fancy. It was just she was on her way home from work. I was at home, and it was so refreshing.
It was priceless.
It was priceless,
yes.
And I woke up feeling so much better.
Right.
With no more solutions than I had yesterday. With
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
I don't have any more solutions, but I feel so much better.
Right, and I can't overstate this how much we have to resist that temptation to fix it, because it's like. She could have very easily said, okay, I've got, you know, she's a doctor. She's highly educated. She could have gone in there with all sorts of different, you know, things. And nope, she just was there listening. And it was amazing.
Well, we've kind of assumed a lot about active listening. In our closing minutes we have, what is it? I mean, practically, people are listening. And I think we're getting really good principles. And I think people are feeling really validated. Like, yeah, I totally know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
What is active listening, kind of a takeaway for us?
Perfect. So I think one of the biggest things to be monitoring when you're in a situation where someone starts to share kind of what's going on with them, maybe you're out for coffee or maybe you're just catching up with someone, your awareness should be on kind of your own thought process as you're listening. So just monitor yourself. Am I feeling the need to jump in with advice? Am I feeling the need to jump to a topic where I can relate and it's kind of more about me? So just kind of that filter and just thinking to yourself, okay, I'm just going to keep sitting. And then, so again, it's a lot of just kind of filtering yourself when you're wanting to jump in with a solution or advice. And then when there is that natural pause in the conversation where you might typically jump in with, well, here's what you got to do, right?
Yeah.
You just say, wow, it sounds like you've had a lot on your plate. Tell me more. You know, or kind of, it seems like this has been pretty challenging for you. You know, you can ask questions. You can.
I love that. Ask questions. I hear a lot of people when they're anxious, they're anxious because they'll tell me, I don't know what to say.
Exactly.
And it really speaks to what gets in the way is confusion about responsibility too.
Right.
It's boundary violations, but there's confusion about responsibility as if I'm supposed to say something. Like the pressure's on me to have to say something, where what we keep repeating again and again is don't say anything.
Right.
It doesn't mean tune the person out.
Right. You're not like, you know, looking at your watch or like, you know, daydreaming, but
really listening.
Really listening. Yep. And that's a great point about the anxiety of having to have the answer. So again, you're monitoring yourself, you're kind of filtering out your potential advice, and then it should be relaxing. It should be relaxing to do active listening because you're not having answers, you're not fixing, you're just being present with that other person. So you're asking questions, but just kind of reminding yourself, like, I don't have to do anything right now, but be here for this person. That's it.
You're able to be at peace and not have anxiety because there is no pressure on you anymore.
Exactly.
Love that.
Exactly. And then if there is that moment where they say to you, what do you think I should do? that's your moment.
Right.
And or after a little while, and if you really do want to offer something, you can say, would you like my advice or would you like me to just keep listening? And I
love that.
Yes.
I love that because like when people say, what do you think I should do? It's taken me years to really work on this and still listen. So if someone says, what do you think I should do? I'll say, well, it sounds really hard.
Yes.
What do you think you should do? And then I just throw it back to them, and they'll all of a sudden they'll run with it.
Oh my gosh.
Because now they're not dependent upon me, but wow, just to see how empowered they feel as they kind of get this thrown back to them. So even then, I find leading with some validation, like, hey, this is really hard. Well, what do you think?
Good point. They might be asking you, what should I do? But there's still more there that they want to share, right? Yeah. And so, as soon as you can kind of give them a little validation and see if there's more they want to add, it's wonderful.
We make it sound so easy, and
don't we? It's so easy,
hard.
Brett.
Yeah.
No, but it is. It's hard, but it's pretty fun once you get the hang of it.
It is, and I know you and I still work on this in our own lives. So, anything else on what active listening is for us to take away, do you think?
I think just, kind of in the next week, challenge yourself. When you're in a conversation with someone who's going through something, just notice how you're feeling. Give yourself permission to just be there and relax. I would say just kind of notice your own process and then how can I help? Like you said, if there's that opening.
So just notice. Do a lot of noticing.
Just notice.
A lot of noticing. Yeah. Not a lot of talking.
Yep.
I've heard God gave us one mouth and 2 ears, so we are supposed to be listening twice as much as we're talking.
Right. It might surprise people, especially if you're used to being the one who has all the answers. People might be like, "Are you okay?" Like you're very quiet. Yeah. But no, I think you'll find it's much more benefit than not.
Well, Krista, this has been beneficial, I'm sure, for many people that are listening, and it sounds so incredibly easy. It's don't just say something, sit there, basically, which seems so irresponsible. It's easy to comprehend, hard to do. So it takes a lot of practice. Yes. And I would love people to really take your advice on this and enjoy a greater connection with their loved ones and at work and things like that. So
they could also listen to this podcast with a loved one and practice.
Ooh, that's great.
You know what's going on, and you can just try it together. Yeah, so that's just one more bonus idea for to take away.
Listen, if you've listened once, now listen again with your partner, or even like as a parent.
Oh my goodness,
do that.
Listen to this with your kiddo.
Yeah,
just kind of anyone, and then you can practice
and ask. How do I do in this? Like, what grade would you give me? Yes. And just if you have that much courage, but it really fosters a greater connection.
Definitely.
Well, we thank everybody for joining us. Chris, it's great to have you here.
Thanks, Brett.
This was a lot of fun, and I feel heard whenever I'm with you. So you do this well. Thanks again. We look forward to connecting again on our podcast real soon.
Thank you as always for listening, and please be sure to leave us a review. While this podcast can't be a replacement for therapy, we hope you enjoyed our discussion today and join us again next time. Nystrom & Associates is always available to those who are struggling. If you find yourself in need of support and help, please check us out at nystromcounseling.com.